You're listening to Your 2 Cents, the podcast, made possible by Credit Unions of Atlantic Canada. Today, Sylvia catches up with self-love advocate and TikTok superstar Alicia McCarvell, who shares that her financial well-being and overall self-worth have more to do with each other than you might think.
I love you for so many reasons. I'm so excited to be talking to you today.
Mutual.
Well, thank you. I am excited today to talk to you about money.
Oh, money.
Money.
Dreaded money.
Isn't it funny? I think you and I've had a lot of great conversations about money, which I've always really found fascinating. The whole point of this podcast is for people to not be so scared to do that. Yeah. And so you've had such a journey in a relationship with money. So I have lots of questions for you about this. So I want to dive into kind of starting at the start. You are now living debt-free. Mm-hmm. You owe no one anything.
Except for my vehicle. So let's start there. I just bought a new Jeep, but I only bought a new Jeep because I was debt-free.
Woo-hoo!
So that to me doesn't technically count.
Okay. So aside from the Jeep, which does not technically count, you are not always debt-free. So can you talk to me a bit about what your relationship with money has been?
Oh, man. You know the age-old saying, living paycheck to paycheck? Very much my life for a long time. Looking back, though, it didn't really necessarily need to be my life. But I think that like my mental health and my just well-being played a huge part in my debt, amongst other things. My debt has been growing since I got my very first credit card, which I then had to quickly get rid of and lived without a credit card for a very long time because I just was so terrified of running it back up and getting myself into a hole, which can happen so quickly. And sometimes it feels like that's what your lenders want, which was an overwhelming moment of clarity when I realized and we became debt-free was how easy it was to live debt-free once you were debt-free. I'm more conscientious about my money now than I ever was in my entire life. If you were to ask Scott and I, who is the frugal person in the relationship, it is most definitely him. I've always been a believer in doing things now. Life is too short. Almost to a fault. However, I've had really great experiences and I don't really take back any money that was ever spent anywhere on any of those experiences. But I am a very different person today than I was while going through debt. I've had anywhere from $37 in my bank account with no savings to like having to put things back at the grocery store because we just couldn't afford them, to now where I have zero debt and I paid my rent late 2 months ago because I knew there was money in there and forgot about it because my entire life has been spent like, do I have enough money for this? Checking my bank accounts on a regular basis, making sure that I was going to be able to pay my phone bill, knowing when everything was coming out of my account because I sometimes only had enough for that money to come out, to now having the privilege of not having to live that life. And my landlord sent me an email 4 days into the month and was like, so I was just wondering, were you planning on paying your rent?
What a polite way of asking.
And don't get me wrong, my landlord is incredible. But I was like, I am so sorry. I was like, this is going to sound so awful. But this is the first time in my life I've never had to worry about if I had enough rent money. And I was like, so this might be a shitty moment for you as my landlord, but this is a very impactful moment for me as a human being because I've never not been able to worry about that. I've never not had to set a reminder on my phone that is the first of the month. Do you have enough money to pay rent? So yeah, I've been putting things back at the grocery store to paying my rent late because I know I have enough money in there and it's not something I have to worry about anymore. But getting from point A to point B has been a learning curve, a drastic learning curve for me.
What was the moment that sort of tipped for you when you wanted to make that change?
My credit score was rocked. A lot of the things that count towards your credit are also the things that are the first to go when you don't have money. So for instance, I've never missed, aside from the one that I forgot to pay, I've never missed a rent payment in my life because that is the roof over my head. So if I didn't have enough money to pay my rent, my money came from paying my credit card. My money came from paying my phone bill. My money came from paying my Wi-Fi and internet bill. And we lived a period of time without any of those things. But then the things that count towards your credit are the things that go without so that you can keep a roof over your head.
Right.
But then when you go to buy a roof over your head, the things that you put on the sidebar to keep the roof over your head are the things that kind of come back to bite you in the ass. And that was, I was super frustrated with that. I've always worked hard to make sure that I could, pay my rent, and I didn't have any issues with that. But I got to a point where we were struggling, and I did have a phone bill go into collections and go so severe into collections that I wasn't even worried about it anymore because there was nothing I could do. Like, I could not financially afford to pay it. And I had to kind of set it aside and not worry about it, because if I would have worried about it, I just would have put myself in more debt in more areas of my life. So that I guess my overall frustration, but that major phone bill that went into debt was probably the moment where I was like, okay, like, how do I get myself out of this without putting myself in somewhere else?
Right.
I think that's where my happy-go-lucky, I'll worry about it when I have to type of mentality really came in handy, because there was really nothing I could do. So I didn't get behind on my other things and kind of just left that to the side. But yeah, when I paid that up and I saw my credit score increase, that was kind of like a motivating moment for me to be like, okay, this is something that I can do. I think there's a lot of stigma on credit scores in general, that people think that this is something that takes 10 plus years to increase your credit score, when realistically, like, over the last 2.5 years, I've been able to increase mine by almost 200 points.
Which is incredible.
So it's one of those things where it's been a focus, and I have the privilege of working a job that's allowed me to pay it off for sure. But there were other things that I did before I was working this job and before I have the privilege of the current job that I have, that have contributed to me literally pulling myself out of the hole so I could start filling it back up properly. And I was like, okay, this is like doable.
There, to me, I always think about the scene from Confessions of a Shopaholic, where she's like running from the guy who's like trying to collect money from her.
Yeah.
And the whole, spoiler alert if you haven't seen Confessions of a Shopaholic, which is quite an old movie at this point. But at the end of the day, he wanted her to like just talk to him to figure out a plan. And she ran and ran and ran and had every excuse under the book and was like, it's such a funny movie. But the moral of the story is so important. I, in my younger years, was not super responsible. Also just didn't have money at the time. I had student loan debt. I was working my first job. I wasn't getting paid a ton. You're sort of in the YOLO stage of your life, like the exact same things that you're saying, where you're like, I'll deal with it later. I'll deal with it later. And then the very first time I ended up calling student loans to be like, look, I live in fear of your phone calls. What can I do? They're like, hey, you came to the right place. Let's have a conversation. And immediately my blood pressure dropped. Because you're like, oh, like, you're not trying to arrest me.
Yeah.
You're doing your job. You want something from me. It doesn't have to be everything. So I learned really quickly, okay, let's make a plan then. What can I afford to give you? And then as I started making more money, I could give more and more to eventually the point that I was paying off my student loan. But that was like the fear and terror of that phone call. If I actually had just picked up the first time and said, I can't pay you right now.
Yeah.
What do I do? I would have saved myself so much agony. So what is your advice on navigating that kind of relationship?
When I lost my job, I was like, I'm going to get ahead of this, because at this point I was already starting to turn things around. I wasn't willing to allow my credit score to take the brunt of me losing my job. And, again, I didn't have a savings. I had been putting that's the double-edged sword of it. I had been putting all of my money towards our debt that I didn't have a savings. So when I lost my job, it was like, shoot, like, how am I going to navigate this? And I called everybody, my financing company through my vehicle. I called my bank to help with support payments on my credit card and my line of credit, like my student line of credit. I called the company who I had to go to for an extra loan outside of my bank. It was mixed. So it was one of those things where I got some people who were willing to support me and help me. And, it was like, no questions asked. We're going to bump your next 2 payments. We'll tack them on at the end. It's still money owed, but it won't be such a stressful situation. And then I had some people just shut the door in my face and say, sorry, can't really help you with that. That's not really something we do. And I will say that the people I didn't go looking for money from were the people that were the hardest to deal with, the people who had been increasing my credit and, giving me these increased credit cards and things like that. Whereas my financing through my vehicle and the loan that I had gone through a third party were much easier to deal with. I do think, though, for the majority of the conversations that I have had, that you being the person that's calling and picking up the phone can make a difference. And that hasn't always been my experience, but I do know for the majority, depending on who you get on the other side, they, most creditors and people who you have money owed with are looking for a solution. It's their job.
Right. It's such a sensitive topic. And thank you for being so open about it, because I think people need to hear that you can get through it.
Yeah.
There's no worse feeling than feeling like you can't pay the bill. Then someone's mean to you about it. And that level of shame is just like piled on top of itself. And so I learned, someone told me one time, as it relates to customer service. So I called, I got someone, and they're like, guess what? If you start escalating, they start escalating, blah, blah, blah. You can hang up and try calling back, and you'll probably get a new person and try that conversation again.
Yeah.
And so I thought that was so smart, because I remember one time fighting tooth and nail about something. And I was like, wait a minute. And I hung up and I called back and I got someone lovely, and they helped me with the exact thing that the last person said they couldn't. So sometimes like there's just a person and it's a bad day and it's a bad thing, and maybe the person before them took a strip off of them and they're reeling from that. You're allowed to hang up and try calling back. When someone told me that, I was like, all right. And I've done it before, and you don't escalate and neither do they. And you tend to get to a better solution. So as much as I'm not like for hang up on everybody, that's not the nicest thing in the world.
No, but
if
sometimes
the conversation,
it's necessary.
and you can politely go like, okay, I'm really sorry. I don't think this is
Going anywhere.
Hang up, try and call back. Because I think you leading the charge shows a level of accountability that they want to see in people's payments. And if you get an understanding person on the other line, they might have been in those shoes too.
Yeah. My husband and I, so Scott and I's, he had a credit card, which was I had gotten rid of my credit card pretty young. He had one. The bank kept increasing. It got to the point where we couldn't pay for it anymore. It went into collections. I lost my job. It was a series of unfortunate events. We never should have gotten the card into that much debt in the first place, but we're talking over $10,000 on one credit card. And then we couldn't pay it, couldn't make the minimum payments, which were something atrocious, like over $1,300.
Wow.
And I was like, okay, well, we can't worry about that. And if you know my husband, that's not a thing. Then it went into R9, I think is the status it goes into, which is like the worst status it can possibly be in. And it goes on knock on your credit. We knew it was headed there, but it was like once it got there, I was able to kind of talk him through that to be like, okay, well, we can't do anything about that at this point. It's no longer increasing in its, in our debt whatsoever at this point. It's a bad knock. It's not going anywhere. We've kind of just got to figure our, crap out, and then we'll get there. So fast forward, we've had this debt and it is accumulating at a smaller level of interest because now it's in a collector. I lose my job. We start to get better with money. Things start to change for us financially. The first lump sum of money that we made, we both looked at each other. We're like, we're going to get rid of this credit card debt. At this point, it had increased itself to like $17,000. And I said to him, let's call. We're financially able to pay this off at this point. It'll make you feel a lot better. The whole point was to be debt free. This was the only thing we had left on our debt. The rest of it was gone at this point. I had nothing. I had nothing else. We only had his credit card. So that's also a little secret and a little tidbit for those listening is that once your credit card goes to that status and it is in collections, you do have the right to negotiate and do not feel bad doing that. There has been a cumulative interest. They're making plenty of money off of it. So when I was having the conversation, we negotiated that in there that we would only pay 65% of the total debt. The moment you pay off an outstanding debt is like, no, I mean, I loved my wedding day and I loved marrying my husband, but the moment of becoming debt free is like something that is indescribable because it is a moment where you realize that every one of those like shitty feelings that you had and every fear of conversation and fear of phone call and, just that guilt and of feeling like, I don't know, inadequate turns into this great moment, a feeling of success. However, looking back, and something that I think for a lot of people to realize is that the majority of the world is in debt. And I think similar to like, obviously my self-love journey, I lived my whole life thinking that I was alone in how I was feeling about my body. I also lived the majority of my life feeling alone in how I felt about money and my debt. But everybody is experiencing the exact same thing. and everybody has those like feelings of fear. But yeah, that was our crappy experience.
I think it's such an important piece of information because, again, you feel like you're powerless. You feel like you've been shamed. In your particular case, you have someone who was piling onto all of that, which is so unfortunate.
Yeah.
But there is still power to be had. And I think researching, calling, doing the work to figure out, okay, it's scary. I'm not going to avoid this conversation, but I'm going to do something about it.
Yeah.
And trying to take that power back is so important, which is why I think it's so important that we talk about money and we talk about scary stories and we talk about all those things because, to your point, we've all been there. People go into debt for so many different reasons.
100%. And it's easy to go into debt.
Absolutely.
It is easy to go into debt. When
Absolutely.
I lost my job, I realized how quickly you can go from having a roof over your head to possibly not having a roof over your head.
Absolutely.
Buying local is building local. Credit unions understand that every dollar spent on a locally owned business creates 2 to 4 times more jobs and other economic benefits than a dollar spent in a similar non-locally owned business. And for every $100 spent at a local business, 68 remains local. They say err on the side of caution. Credit unions say dream big. They say it can't be done. Credit unions say, why not? They say play it safe. Credit unions say game on. Looking to start a small business and understand what it takes for it to be profitable? Credit Union's break-even calculator can help. Check the link in today's show notes.
One thing that we talked about, you and I, very recently was the amazing feeling of your credit score going up.
Yeah.
Which like just happened for you. Someone gave you like a giant gold star about your credit score. I was less responsible with money when I was younger, had been building up my credit score. I had a conversation recently with someone who was like, you're getting this because your credit score is amazing. And I was like, oh my God.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. And I feel like of all the things, like I've had a lot of big moments happening in my life over the last couple of years, and you've had the same thing. Someone saying that to me, I felt like I had righted such a wrong and that someone was going, you did it in a way that they couldn't even understand. And I called a girlfriend of mine who also owns her own business and similarly had this conversation happen. What a great feeling to have that. And what people don't realize, because when I was younger, I did not care about future me and my credit score, was that you don't even realize the things it's going to unlock for you. Sometimes that credit score could literally alter the course of the next thing you're about to do. And having it could be the greatest gift of your life. Yeah. So being cautious about, people can end up in debt for so many reasons, and your credit score can get damaged as a result of that. If there is any hope, it's that you can fix it. Yeah. It's not too late. You've had this happen in a very short period of time.
Yeah. And I mean, I'm 30, almost 32. So, I mean, I have my entire life ahead of me and I owe nobody money. And like, that's a cool feeling, but I don't regret finding it later in life. I feel like I have all these memories that I got a chance to have. And then now I'm sitting in a position where I get to pick and choose who I owe money to. And I get to pick and choose where my money goes. And I'm more responsible when I was a kid, and I'm in a different place in my life. So to be honest, I don't really take back those experiences because it did along the way. Like when I didn't have a job, there were so many things that we did for saving money that I wouldn't know now, right? Which have become a huge part of how we live our lives on a regular basis. So now that I am debt free and we are making money, I'm making more money than I would have been making had I have not been debt free, or had I not been so in debt as, when we were younger. But I also have really cool memories that I get to keep and have forever, regardless of that debt. So I think there's a time and place to worry about it. I think it's something that we need to be taught more about early on. And I think that attributes a lot. I had no idea what a status on a credit card was. I had no idea how quickly your credit could decline. I had no idea what went towards my credit, what didn't go towards my credit. I didn't know any of that stuff. And I think that in order for anything to change for a lot of people, you need to be taught about it earlier so you can be conscientious about it faster and sooner. Yep. And not, be the person who's Googling it later to find it out, because I spent so much time researching it on my own when realistically, I think I should have learned about it in high school. I think I should have understood the meaning of debt before I was ever able to become in debt, or I was ever able to ask for a credit card. I didn't know that if I got a credit card, I couldn't take cash off of it, that it would increase my interest rate on those purchases. And I had no idea about that. So when I got my first credit card and I went out and I took out $200 on it, I was so confused as to why that was more money on my thing. And I'd call the bank, and of course the bank's like, you're an idiot. Like, don't you know that? But you don't know about that. You don't, when you sign up for a credit card or you get a loan, nobody walks you through that process. They tell you about the dotted line and the interest rate, but they don't teach you what that actually means.
Right.
They don't explain any of the actual hard parts about it. So I think that if I would have learned about it sooner, like in high school, before I was ever able to put myself into debt, I might have made some better experiences. And that's like a learning opportunity for the rest of the world, parents to having conversations.
We've talked about it quite a bit, so I feel like we've given some tips already to people. But if someone was in debt and feeling like they could not get out, we've had obviously a rough couple of years. People have ended up in all kinds of different financial situations. What advice would you give them?
Do your research and know who you're talking to when it comes to your lenders. The internet is large. There are ways to negotiate what is owed, and you need to take those chances. Find ways to save in your everyday life that you're already spending. There, you might feel like you have to go without for a little while, but you're not really. You're not really. Find an app that'll track where your spending is so you can put that into perspective. And then last but not least, tell your friends and family so you don't feel that shame when you have to say no. And that was a huge one for me because when I lost my job and I was in debt, I was so fearful of and embarrassed about being in debt that I was missing out on opportunities, but not telling people why, and then feeling that guilt. And then my friends are wondering why I'm not being a part of things. And finally, I just was like, hey guys, I don't have money. I have no money. I can barely pay my bills. I can't go out for dinner. Like, I can't go out for drinks. I can't be doing this stuff. And you will be surprised at how supportive your friends and family actually are, because I'm obviously so grateful for my friends and family, but it was a difference of like my friends being like, oh, well, we don't have to go out tonight. Like, when you're prioritizing your finances and you're prioritizing your credit score and your future, those are not things to feel guilty and embarrassed about. Those are like real cool adult decisions that you're making. That's probably one of the most impactful ones, was just like sharing it with people so that they understood, so that they could kind of be there to support you and keep it front of mind. Like, hey, how's it going? Do you need support? Is there anything I can do to help? Not necessarily financial help, just like moral support. Like, you're doing great.
It's completely linked to mental health. You could have felt so isolated. You feel like no one's going through the same thing as you. So I think raising your hand and telling people, and I think that goes for so much of what people struggle with, whether it's finances or otherwise. If people don't raise their hand and say, I'm just having a tough time, no one's a mind reader. You have no clue. I think we've all been like blown open and been more raw over the last couple of years. So I think hopefully anyway, people are feeling like they can check in on each other more and that there's opportunity for that. But until you say something, people aren't going to know. I'm so thankful for you having this conversation with me because you've been so raw and open. And I think people need to hear that it's okay and that you are allowed to say things aren't okay, and that the people that love you will go, okay, we're in it together. And it is the difference of going out to eat versus sitting inside and having a meal together.
Around Christmas, I couldn't give anything. The 2 years that I had no money. I couldn't give my family what they wanted or deserved, but because they knew and understood, it wasn't a shitty feeling. It was like, okay, well, what do you want to do? Do we need to do something different for gifts? And when you're sharing it like that, I never in a million years would I have ever realized that the correlation between my journey with like my love for myself and my self-love is so the same as like my journey has been with money and my credit and debt and etc. Because it is so true. Like, majority of the world is living in fear that they are going through things alone, but the majority of the world is going through all of the same things. And when you are able to kind of share that, it's one of the most freeing parts of being able to travel on that journey, because it's like, oh, I didn't realize that this isn't something I should be embarrassed about. The more we share too, like, this is the other thing that I think is so important about conversations like this. The more we share that it is normal and that everybody's going through it, the more people will seek to get help and support sooner, because it isn't an embarrassing and shameful thing to be in debt. It is a normal thing to be going through that. However, there are tips and tricks, and there are ways to kind of get out of it quickly if you need to. But slowly is the majority, and there's nothing wrong with that. Obviously, my situation is very different. But I learned a lot in those 2 years of paying off my debt that, I should have been taught sooner. And now I would like to continue to have conversations around it, because it was such a shameful part of my life. And I lived a lot of years being in shame of having that lingering debt, when realistically, everybody's living with the same type of thing. And it's,
You didn't have to.
No.
You didn't have to. So what are your financial goals for the future?
Me and my husband made the decision that when I made my salary of the job I was working, that I could quit that job, because then I would have made the money I would have made for the next year, and then I could focus on what I loved doing. We hit that. We made another financial goal specifically on the balance of our bank account for when Scott would quit his job. We've hit that. He has not quit his job yet, but we're working on it. Okay. Our next financial goal is to buy land somewhere.
Exciting.
Ideally on water, because we would like to live by the water.
Amazing.
So that's like another financial goal for us. And I would like to have enough money saved and made over the next year to be able to pay my best friend to work for me. And that would be such a cool, rewarding moment to be able to like offer her a salary to come support me and, give her a side of the business. Like, I'd like to have a charity, and I think she would be such a wonderful person to run it, but I need to bank enough money. So my financial goal for that is to the house, to be able to bank enough money to be able to hire a friend of mine. And then once my probation period is up with this Jeep, I plan on paying it off. So
nice. I love it.
Yeah. So I can get back to feeling debt free. Yeah. Lots of goals that are revolving around things that they never really revolved around, which is super cool. I feel like my life revolved around getting out of debt or paying off bills or, and so now it's cool to like be in a point where I can think about like the financial things that are, going to do well on my credit and, help me move my business and my career forward. So yeah, it's very cool to be in this position.
I'm very proud of you. Congratulations.
Thanks for all your support.
My pleasure. It's been such an amazing journey, like watching your business grow, but also I love having these conversations because we are all learning as we go. You learn from tough stuff, regardless of what it is. Tough money stuff makes you learn about money and appreciate it more. When you have more, you think differently about it. And it's just it's an empowering thing. And I think it all boils down to every single person that I'm speaking to, it boils down to being empowered to do something for yourself. And we don't learn enough in school about money. We don't learn enough, even in our families. And it depends on the family circumstances. It's different for every single person. Yeah. So listening to your peers talk about money is something I'm so excited to be able to share with people. And you being so honest about things that were so hard is such a gift that you're giving to people. So thank you. I'm so proud of you. I cannot wait to come tour your tiny home. It's going to be the best. And it's
going to a bunk bed and you can sleep in it.
Yay. I haven't had a bunk bed sleepover in so long. I can't wait. Thank you for being here. Truly. You're such a delight. And I can't wait to see. You're so welcome.
This is such a cool thing.
This
is such a cool thing.
Thank you so much.
Wow. Great chat. I love Alicia.
I know, me too. And as you heard on this episode, she was so raw and really bared her soul on the financial and self-love journey she's been on, which is pretty cool to see how intertwined those two things are. She talks a lot about reaching out and asking for help, which in the conversation, you can tell it seems really hard at the beginning, but the minute you start, the help is absolutely there.
Yeah. So our Give Me Credit tip of the day is exactly that. Ask for help. It's good advice in finances and in life. Credit unions are an excellent place to go for that because they know that you're more than just your balance. Even if you feel like you're at your financial worst, they've got banking services that they can tailor just for you, and they've got your back.
They sure do. What's that saying that the kids say? If you can't see me at my worst, you can't have me at my best?
I believe I've seen that meme. Yes.
Whether that's a meme or not, that is exactly who the credit unions are. They will be there at your worst, so you can be there at your best too.